I did not come to faith until my early 30s. I was raised Catholic. As I look back on my childhood, I was raised Catholic, even went to some Catholic school. I would say my family was probably sporadic in our church attendance. I remember times when we definitely went to Sunday school, but most of the time, I would say we probably weren't regular attenders of church. I would also say that, you know, just going to Catholic school and the Catholic masses, I knew all the traditions and the routines and when to stand up and sit down and what to repeat back to the priest and all of those things. And so, I had all of those things down, but I would say that the faith never really resonated with me. I never really read the Bible. I don't remember as a family us reading a Bible. I don't know that I ever even owned a Bible at any point growing up. And so it just wasn't anything that we dove into much as a family in terms of reading, understanding things of God or theology in general. I would have probably said that I believed in Jesus. If you had asked me that, I probably would have said I believed in him, at least in some intellectual way. But, I certainly wasn't following him. I was certainly, more concerned about the things that I was interested in. I probably, was trying to live a good life and be a good person. But in terms of, what is God's will and trying to understand what that was and align with it, I didn't know anything about doing that or have any interest in doing it. And I think just growing up in the Catholic faith and seeing a lot of the scandals that were going on in the Catholic faith, certainly turned me away, I would say, from just organized religion in general. And if someone had asked me about it, I probably would have given all the standard answers of, like, who are you to think that you have the right answer? And, why are you trying to scare people with they're going to go to hell if they don't believe something? I mean, all those typical things are probably things I would have said and probably did say at the time. So, in early adulthood, I would say I mentioned this in my last video. I really idolized baseball. I mean, baseball is what I did growing up. It was my love. It was, I would have told people it was kind of my church. It was where my home was, my friends were. Looking back, it's certainly something that I idolized. I couldn't even have told you back then what that meant to have an idol like that in your life. But for me, it was definitely baseball. But that said, it did, get me to college. It did. I will say I was married young. So when I was going off to UT Arlington, I was living in Florida at the time. And as I was considering moving to Texas to play Division I baseball, I had a girlfriend at the time. And I just remember her mother, would not have allowed us to move to Texas together if we weren't married. And so we ran down to the courthouse and got married and moved off to Texas. And so, again, I was young, didn't probably really even understand what I was doing, but I just know I wanted her to come with me to Texas. And so we ran down to the courthouse and got married. So ended up, playing ball through college. I graduated from college around 2001, started working in auto finance right after that. And I would say probably about 7 years or so into my marriage, I finally decided that it just wasn't something that I wanted anymore. And, selfishly, I walked out on my marriage and I caused a tremendous amount of pain for my ex-wife, I'm sure for her family, even for myself at the time. Looking back, knowing what I know now, looking back, it definitely felt like I was tearing flesh apart. If you kind of understand that from a biblical perspective, when I divorced my first wife, and so it was a painful experience for me. And as I look back at even my early work days, there were even people in my job who from time to time would try to talk to me about God and faith. And I would always tell them, the same things I mentioned, you guys are just trying to scare people and I don't buy into the organized religion stuff. And I can remember a buddy of mine even giving me a book about evidence for Christ. And I can remember scribbling in the margins all the reasons why it didn't make sense and why it was just trying to scare people. I still have that book to this day. So So I just couldn't see it at the time. There were definitely blinders on, and I didn't understand it. And quite frankly, I didn't really even have an interest in understanding it. So I think you could probably say I was, running from God is probably a good way to describe it. I don't think he was hiding in any way from me. I think I just really didn't have any interest in having a relationship with him at that point. So I was remarried in 2007 to Janelle, who's my wife now. We had our daughter Caitlin in 2008, and at that point, I had my wife. We were starting a family. We both had good jobs. We were both progressing in our jobs. We had just built a house 5 minutes from our work office. So things were good at that point. We even had 2 dogs and a cat. I mean, we had everything from the outside looking in that you could possibly want in early adulthood, and life was good. I think, from my perspective, I probably thought I had figured it out and things were moving in the right direction. But as we all know, life continues to happen. And about 3 years into my second marriage, it was Janelle this time who said, "You know what? I'm not happy. The living situation we were in was not ideal, and it was just tough." She decided that she wanted to spend some time apart, and so she moved out. I got my own place. She got her own place, and we lived apart. And probably the hardest part during that time was just not having my daughter with me every night. And so we were passing our daughter back and forth between us every night. Really, really difficult and challenging. Any of you that are parents out there to not be with your family every night. And so that was just really, really hard. And during that time, so that lasted probably over 2 years that we were separated. Never got divorced, although I will say I was pretty bitter about the whole thing and angry about it, and had divorce papers drawn up, and so I was all ready to get divorced. And during that time, the same friend of mine who had given me the book invited me to church. And I said, "Well, what do I have to lose?" So I went to church one Saturday night with him. And now this time it was a Baptist church, and I had never been to a Baptist church. And I can remember walking in and sitting down, and they opened the Bible and they started reading out of it. And I was like, "Okay, this is different. This is interesting." And so I listened, and of course, didn't understand half of what they were talking about. But something about it was just different than the Catholic masses that I had been used to growing up. And I was certainly at a point in my life where I felt like I did not understand what was going on or why, or what was happening. And so I just started going back. I started going back to church every weekend by myself. And I started reading the Bible. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but something just felt like I needed to dig in and figure this thing out. And so that went on for several weeks, and kind of culminated in me in my bedroom one evening, and just kind of finally breaking down and crying and asking the Lord to come into my life. And I can distinctly remember telling him, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what he's doing, but I do know that I need him in my life. And whatever that meant at that point, I was good with, whether my family got back together, whether we didn't, whether I stayed in the same job. Like at that point, I really just knew that I needed him in my life. And I was just ready to turn from my ways and start learning and understanding about his ways. And so I asked him to come into my life. And, I distinctly remember over the next several weeks, like this interest of mine that I had in starting to read the Bible and going to church, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And man, before long, I was on fire for the Lord. And I just could not get enough of reading and understanding and learning about him and his word and his ways. And I just, something happened. Even to this day, I can't really explain it. But what I can say is that all the things my whole life that didn't make sense and that I was arguing against, just suddenly they all made sense, and or at least they started to make sense. And it was like these scales or blinders had been taken off of my eyes. And I just started to dig into everything I could read and understand about the Lord, and watch sermons, and tell everybody all about it. Now, of course, when I talked to Janelle about this stuff, she wanted no part of it, and she didn't want to hear it, and she was still, wanting to be on her own and separate. And again, for some reason, for me, it was like the anger and the bitterness started to melt away. And again, like I said, whatever she wanted, I was fine with. Like, if she wanted to come back together, great. If she didn't, that was great. Like, I just knew I wanted to keep following this path down towards the Lord. And so that's kind of the way it went for several months. I mean, it was probably at least a good 6 months to a year, I would say, before Janelle started to gain some interest in some of this stuff. And I won't dig into too much of her testimony, but I will say that, she had a similar experience where she finally asked God to come into her life, and lo and behold, he did. And before you know it, we both had kind of reconciled to God, and then he reconciled our family back together. And so after over 2 years, we decided to kind of give it another shot and move back in together and recommit ourselves to the family and the relationship. In 2014, we had our second child. So we had our first son, who we named Cooper Cross. And so that was awesome. And from there, we've just really, over the years, over the past 10 years or so, I would say, we've just continued to try to learn more and more about God's ways and his will and what he wants from us and for us. I will say we found a church home here in Allen, Texas. Cottonwood Creek Church is where we attend and have attended for the past handful of years. We've all since been baptized there as well. And then I chose, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I chose to go through the Ministry Academy program at the church, which is basically just a year-long program where they teach you through the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so I went through that program. And then in 2021, Janelle and I decided to start leading a young adults life group there. And so she helps to lead it and I teach it. And we're basically just trying to share as much as we can with the younger generation, certainly sharing with them all the things that we wish we knew and did and followed at their age. And so that's been awesome. We've been getting more and more involved in the marriage ministry at the church, trying to just help out, again, couples that are struggling or going through challenges like we went through, and just trying to impress upon them how much, they need Jesus in their relationships and in their life. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at this point, is we're just continuing to try to, walk the path of obedience. And looking back, I could certainly tell you that if you ever told me that I was going to be, teaching the Bible on the weekends and telling everybody I knew and could about Jesus, I certainly would have told you that you were crazy. But man, to me, it's just evidence of how good God is, because I certainly couldn't have done any of this. I certainly wouldn't be sitting here talking to you all about Jesus had he not come into my life. And it's just, to me, it's just one simple testimony of just how great our God truly, truly is. And, not only did he create all things, not only does he sustain all things, but he also shows us the greatest display of love that this world will ever know, when he sent his son to bleed and die for our sins, for our wickedness, for our rebellion. He still chose to do that in order to reconcile us back to him. And I think that's just amazing, amazing grace that he shows to us. And so, for all of those who truly believe in him and truly follow him, I would say just continue to be obedient, continue to press into him and to seek his will for your life. And for those of you who don't know him, I would tell you to just keep seeking and keep searching and keep knocking. And Scripture tells us that he's there and he will answer. If you truly want him and ask him to come into your life, he absolutely will do that, and it will absolutely change your life. And so, again, just one simple testimony of how great God is and what he can do in your life and what he's done in my life. And so at the end of the day, I would just say that all glory and honor and praise is him. It's not us. It's nothing that we've done or that we certainly deserve. It's all grace from him and love from him. And so get to know him if you don't know him, and you will never, ever regret that decision. And so that's my testimony. I hope that encourages some of you out there. Maybe leave me a comment if you have any questions or thoughts. But otherwise, I will be back hopefully in about a week with another video. And in the next one, we'll talk a little bit about why I named the channel Born Again, and from a biblical perspective, what that means and looks like. And so with that, I will sign off. God bless you guys. Love you, and we'll talk soon.